Today, we're joined by an eBay legend, the eBay legend, Griff. We're turning the mic around on him, and we get to interview him today. So Griff has been with eBay since 1996 and was one of the very first eBay employees. Griff founded eBay customer service and the eBay online community. He's worked in customer service, seller education, seller engagement, and hosted the eBay radio, and now hosts the eBay for Business podcast. Griff, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for that great introduction. I had no idea that I was responsible for eBay.
You are. in sellers' minds that tune into the eBay for Business podcast and even eBay radio when it was on, when I think eBay customer service, I think podcast.
Oh boy, that's a lot of pressure.
You've become the voice of eBay in my head every week.
You may want to see a doctor.
And that's true. It is true. The voice of eBay for so many years. And Griff, you taught me so much. We were on the team together and I learned from you. So hopefully you're proud.
Oh,
I've imparted much of your wisdom to Liz.
Oh, absolutely. Very proud. You were a good student.
Sit up straight, breathe right.
Right. From your diaphragm.
Cut down the obscure references.
Those are, yeah, that's important. Remember to breathe in. You can always cut out breaths. You want as much power coming from your diaphragm as possible. And this is of no interest to our audience, I'm sure, but
notes, folks.
Just folks.
Yes, folk.
This is all the training I've had to endure the last 15 episodes.
I'm not gonna have any comment on this stuff.
Griff has.
Sorry.
All right, Griff.
Well, I'm so pleased to be here. I don't know what you're going to ask me, and I don't know if I can answer it all, but I know where it's buried, but I can't give you a map.
All right, Griff.
What?
So your name is nearly synonymous with eBay. And how did you discover eBay?
Oh, yeah. So I think a lot of people know that story already. You sure you want me to repeat it? I'll try to make it a condensed version, so I'm not like your, old dotty uncle that just goes on and on at the party. It was 1996. I was in between careers, having a tough time in my life. And I had started building and selling computers locally. And a friend of mine who I'd never met, just knew him through email, through a news group, IBM news group, he worked for the New York City, NYU in New York City, New York University, in their IT department. And he was in charge of deassessing all their equipment. He'd put it up for sale in their news group. And one day he knew I had a list of things I was looking for the next group of computers I was reassembling. And he said, I don't have this chip available here, but I found this website called Auction Web, and the chip you want is there and you can buy it. You have to bid on it. It's like an online auction. I was intrigued. And that's how it started. That was my first purchase. And I think I actually have saved somewhere in my archives the email that showed that I won that. It was on May 10th, 1996. You won, like for $12 or something. And I was hooked. What's way back then? 1996. A lot of our listeners were probably not born. And then most were.
Don't remind me. No.
Do you remember?
Yeah, no, I started
in 1996. Where were you, Liz?
I had my son.
Oh,
who's now 25.
See, so you were your first child. Is that your first child? Oh, listen to me becoming the interviewer. I'm sorry.
Turning the mic back around.
How did that make you feel back then? Doug was just getting out of high school, if I remember correctly.
I was 26. I was actually working. No, I wasn't working for an internet startup yet, but I was close. But when I discovered eBay, I was terrified of it because there was all this cool music stuff on there, and I was scared that I would buy it.
You were scared. Interesting take on inventory.
Right. It scared me.
Scared by inventory. Like that.
All those Duran Duran posters. Can't have them all.
I'm sure your audience has heard a earful about Duran Duran. Yes.
And more.
I'm sure he snuck those in a couple of episodes.
It's true.
So anyway, that's how I got involved. And I started buying stuff. I actually started to list a few things. And it was really not easy back then. If you weren't around, you had to do everything yourself. There was no picture services. There was no payment services. Everyone got paid through the mail. So there were a few merchants who put up credit card links, but the majority of people that were listing, the only way they could accept payment was you had to mail it in with check or money order or cash. And to wait for the check to arrive, and then you had to wait for it to clear, and then you shipped it to the person. But it all worked. It was all unique, and it was a lot of fun. And there was a lot of people coming to try it out. They'd heard word of mouth, or they discovered the site. And as you know the story, Pierre put up Pierre Omidyar, the founder of eBay, the real founder, not, right. I had nothing to do with that. Put up a chat board where we could all hang out and sort of support each other. And I started getting more involved in that, with showing people how you host pictures. And back then you'd actually have to have your own FTP or web server, know how to upload digital files there, know how to reference them using image tags inside a description. It was a long learning curve, but I always pride myself on my skill at making things that sound arcane and hard to understand, make it easy to understand. And so I started doing that a lot. So I spent a lot of time there, and that was like providing customer service for free. And I came to the attention of Pierre and Jeff Skoll after I disappeared for a couple of weeks in the fall for many reasons. I got a phone call asking where I'd been. Am I okay? And do you want to work for us? And after a short period of negotiations, I believe it was like maybe 15 seconds, I said yes. And that's how it started. And I was living in Vermont at the time. So
did that mean a relocation for you? Were you able to do it remotely?
Well, they offered, Jeff said, we'll pay for you to relocate. We'll find you an apartment. And I went, whoa. I mean, you have to remember, none of us knew what it was going to turn into. And I wasn't ready to make that big a commitment. Pick up and move to the West Coast like that. So I said, no, I can't do that, but I can work from home. I mean, it's all internet, right? So why can't we see if that works? And they agreed to it. And I'm glad they did, not only because I wasn't ready to move, but we started to grow shortly after that at a rate that it was really hard to find customer support people in Silicon Valley. Everyone at that time with the new internet bubble wanted manager jobs and huge stock packages. And Pierre was pretty, he said, I'm not going to do that, but he couldn't get anyone to work customer support. So we started hiring people locally in Vermont. I had at its peak, I had about 18 people working in what used to be my art studio, and then became the computer studio, and then became kind of satellite office to eBay customer support. We used to call it eBay East. And that was fun. And a lot of those people stayed with eBay for quite some time. I think they're all gone now, but there were quite a few that stayed when the offer came to become employees, and they took eBay up on that. So, and I wouldn't have been able to do that if I had just moved to the West Coast.
So what was it back then that you think made eBay stand out, and what makes eBay stand out still today?
Well, back then it was the newness of it, and there was really no competition, which surprised us. There was Yahoo tried to jump in the space a year or so after Pierre started eBay, and never really got any traction. And there was another site that started up based in Cincinnati called Up for Sale, that they kind of had that eBay sort of vibe, and they were young and they were really creative. And so we did what any rising company would do. We bought them. We incorporated the four guys into our IT team, and we closed the site down. So, and we were off.
eBay grew like wildfire. Really. But thinking back to, I just think of customer service, Vermont, an art studio. What were the early days of customer service like for eBay?
Well, it was interesting because it wasn't really organized well. I mean, it's been 25 years. Our customer support department resembles nothing of what we did back then. And rightfully so. I mean, we started out servicing less than 10,000 active sellers and buyers in the first iterations of customer support. So you could get answers pretty quick. There was no real set process. We had a POP server. We didn't even have like an internal customer support server, and everyone had like a POP email address. That served us well for a while. But the minute the site started to grow, the minute we hit 1 million users and it kept growing exponentially, there's no way that was going to work. So it was a lot easier for a small group of people to provide customer service to a growing group in the first years, I'd say the first 2 or 3 years. But after that, it just became untenable. And the growth continued so quick for almost, I want to say about 10 years, if I remember correctly. And that provided a constant challenge. One of the cool things we had in customer support, because it was where a lot of people congregated, is we were actually, with the help of some IT guys, well, specifically Mike Wilson, who really built this out, we were able to have customer support people on a discussion board 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And most of those were remote employees or contractors who used aliases and just became presences and on the chat board. And each one had their own personality, and sellers mostly, but some buyers would come. They loved it because they always felt like they were talking to a human being, and they were. I mean, they were talking to real people.
Right.
That was a lot of fun. That was really cool. And as the site grew, that kind of grew less supportable over time. And by the time 2008 came and we had the big layoffs, our community team at the time, which was still supporting those community chats, and at that point there were several of them, that whole team got laid off except for myself. I drove into the office that day knowing there were layoffs. I had a bunch of boxes in the back of my Murano, and I thought, what a new adventure. I've never been laid off before. This will be exciting. Only to find out I'm the only person not. My boss and her boss were both laid off, and they had to tell me this. And I thought, I'm always left out. Everyone else got laid off but me. It was very strange. But yeah. Sorry?
They weren't letting you go anywhere.
No, yeah, I guess not. I don't think it was so much that it was an active, let's keep him. I just think it's like, well, he's been here. I mean, what are we going to do with him? We'll find something. But at that point, community customer support took a big hit. Yeah.
So speaking of,
go
ahead.
No, there was no staff. So,
yeah.
So speaking of community customer support and the evolution of community, tell us about Uncle Griff.
Well, if you haven't figured it out yet, I am a bit of a ham. I love performing. It's something I've done most of my life. The judgment, the judgment is out as if whether I'm any good at it, but that doesn't stop me from doing it. I early on in that first summer had figured out that there were a lot of fights happening on that chat board. People would get angry like at each other. Sometimes not seller buyer, sometimes seller. And I discovered from watching other people in other forums that the best way to dispel a lot of hostility is for someone to come in and be a clown. And so I thought, who better? So I created this persona that I used whenever I was on the chat helping people that summer, and his name was Uncle Griff. And that's how I got that. I still have it as an email address. And he was a persona. He's not real. People start writing notes. Transvestite. He was a cross-dressing dairy farmer of some certain age who lived in Upper West Butt Crack, Vermont. Do I have to tell the whole story? And
it's very detailed, though.
Lived in a big Victorian house on a hill, very gray and weathered. You may be getting a picture in your head of a certain movie. He lived with his mother, who, just like Mrs. Bates, happened to be dead. She'd been dead for years, but that didn't stop Uncle Griff from taking her out in the old Packard. And he used eBay to buy duct tape, because when you have a mummified body that's old, you need a lot of duct tape to hold them together. Otherwise, limbs fall out of the car. So, and people thought this was amusing, and it was great because it would just, Uncle Griff would show up and say, it's time to get into mother's closet and start pulling out stuff and wearing it, and we'll play dress up. And some people would say, oh, you are absurd. But eventually people stopped fighting and they'd start getting into it, and it worked. It was fun.
I can totally see that. I don't think that I joined the eBay community till probably 2005.
Yeah, it was very different by then.
Yeah, it was. So that evolution, you were able to come in, and we all know that sometimes the bickering still happens. So we probably haven't evolved from that. But that evolution of community, can you talk to us about how that's evolved over time and what it is today?
So what's evolved, what's good about it, and that's what I like to focus on, is that
Mhm.
there's always one of the things that eBay highlighted was the human need or the human desire to help other humans, which I think
Mhm.
it wasn't invented by eBay, but I think eBay filled a kind of need at the right time at the right place where a lot of people wanted to take advantage of the democratization of trade that a site like eBay provided with this global reach of buyers and with a middleman that wasn't charging 25-30% for the pleasure of having access to buyers.
Mhm.
But it was hard for people to get started, and I wasn't the only one. There were thousands and thousands of sellers who had some expertise about how to do internet stuff and how to do business stuff, who
Mhm.
would step up and freely give advice. And I think that was the most um, the I think that was the most positive and the most heartening part of the early eBay community, is it reflected everything that was good about people in the end. Yeah, there were people that were nasty. I mean, it's just the way humans can be, and
Mhm.
everyone has a bad day, including me. Go check the Facebook group today. Very bad day. But it really did give a chance to highlight what was good about people. And it became sort of cliche that Pierre said his ethos about starting the site was people are basically good. I think you have to believe that, or why even be alive? Jeez. Um, and seller after seller proved that. And a lot of sellers established friendships and relationships with other sellers, and you never forget those who mentored you, especially if they did it for free. There was there wasn't a service charge for doing it. And that's what kept me engaged for years, because I was only going to do this for a few months. I was sure there was a career in the arts I could go through and ruin, like I'd done so many. And it just got more and more interesting over time, and I never got back to my former life. And in many ways, I'm very glad I didn't.
Oh, I'm glad you didn't either. I grew up and learned so much on those boards, and I am still friends with a couple of people from way back then. We didn't put the connections together till later, but we were able to go back and be like, "Wait a minute, was that you?"
Did I?
It's amazing what you remember, right?
Yes, yes. And that's the value of eBay events.
Yes.
And there were always so many of them, and
Oh my
they've
God.
disappeared for the last year because of, well,
Yeah.
what? It was kind of a weird year. I won't go into it, but they'll return. And I think that's why a
Mhm.
lot of people go to those events. It's not just to meet eBay employees or learn something, but they get to actually talk with other people and other sellers that are in the same sort of boat or situation they are. And there's strength in numbers, especially when you're
Mhm.
in a group of people together. And it never is not exciting. You even employees who've been at eBay for a long time, they really fight to get on that list that they can go to something like eBay Open, because it's not just, it's in Las Vegas and there's everything to do in Vegas. It's because the event itself is so much fun, exhausting.
Mhm.
It's a lot of fun. And hopefully we'll do them again. And I hope they do, because for the last 3 years that we did those events, I had to rent a scooter because my knees were going. But as I've made it very clear, I have brand new surgically implanted knees, and I'm going to walk that distance.
Wow.
So now people are going to have to chase you down on foot and not run after the
Oh yeah,
scooter
because I
and
walk.
hope your battery dies.
Oh, I mean, I literally jog and smile while I'm doing
Very
it.
fast. So you have many hats and you've worn many hats at eBay.
Mm.
So let's shift a little bit. Can you tell us a bit about eBay's education initiatives and what you did with that program?
Yeah, I wasn't alone. I don't want anyone to get the idea that these were, singular efforts. Everything that any of us do at eBay, it does take part of a team, including today with the podcast, by the way. But yeah, so the events team that had started up, and it was run by a man and a woman at eBay, Abby Green and Tom Cotton, and they started this idea about, what if we had these seminars? And we went across the country and we advertised and charged very little money, and we had a day long or maybe even 2 days of seminar where you can learn the basics of eBay, or maybe a more advanced course for people already doing this. And in June of 1999, we had our first test run. It was the first eBay University class, and it was in San Diego at the Sheraton near the hotel, and it was great. It really worked, and people had a lot of fun, and they decided to build that out. And that was 1999. The program ran until 2007, and during that time, we were on the road about 24 weekends a year. Going to different cities, big cities and small. I would have never got to see, like, what was the one that I was just talking with Marcia? Well, there was Sioux Falls. I mean, why would I ever go to Sioux Falls? We had a great time in Sioux Falls, and lots of fun. So I missed that part. It was a lot of work doing all that traveling, but I kept a record, and I believe we saw over 100,000 sellers in those 8 years that we were doing it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And
so
sorry.
No, please go ahead.
It became a kind of, we were up against lots of budgetary and expand. We weren't able to actually, what's the word they use in corporate speak, and I'm losing it right now. It wasn't scalable. So somebody else on that team came up with the idea of, well, why don't we provide this material to people who want to teach it, and then they can hold the seminars and not necessarily rely on us showing up. So that became the eBay U program with eBay education specialists, and that lasted from 2007 to about 2014-15 before that project ended. But that was the core of the education program. But there was always aspects of it where different sellers started side careers, teaching people and coaching people on starting a business, just getting listings up. And there's many people who still do it today, even without support of eBay. And I think it's just an extension of what we were talking about earlier about people wanting to help other people learn how to do something so they can succeed. It was great.
Yeah, we just had Dana Crawford just on a couple of episodes back.
Oh, right.
So speaking of eBay educators.
Yeah, she's never stopped doing it. She's very good at it. She loves doing it. She's passionate about it. Yeah.
She is. So in my brain, I'm thinking, okay, eBay's moving, eBay's shifting. They're going out not only to all of these events, constantly traveling, educating on top of that. Somehow eBay radio started because you weren't busy enough. How did eBay radio come about?
Oh, brother, that was just happenstance like you wouldn't believe. There was this guy, and I guess I could tell you his name. He was a very interesting character. His name was Chris Murch, and he was based in San Diego. And he was a can-do wannabe entrepreneur, and he was great. He started this idea, this is before we met him, about internet radio. He saw that there was, this was before podcast, that you could start internet radio and it could compete with, earthbound tertiary radio. So he started wsradio.com, and he started searching for different content providers, different, ideas for episodes. He had things on collecting and politics and sexual health and everything you can think of. And he loved eBay. So he had this idea in his head. He wanted to get eBay to have a show on his network, his growing network. And he got a meeting with a guy who was an early eBay employee named Kevin McSpadden. Kevin lives here in the Bay Area, and he was part of our advertising team. And he had a meeting with Chris and his team. And I happened to be walking by the conference room. And Kevin says, "Oh, Griff, come here. Come join this meeting. I think you'll find this interesting." And I said, "Okay." And I went in and I sat down, and this short woman was there, and this bearded hippie kind of guy was there. That was Lee Mirabal and her husband, John Sell, I would find out. And I sat between them, and I was listening to Chris Murch's presentation. And Kevin says, "And if we do this, who would be great? Griff could be the host." And Lee Mirabal turned to me and said, "Yeah, you're an interesting guy." And I said, "Wait a minute, Lee Mirabal, did you have a radio show on WNBC AM late in the day?" And she said, "Yeah." I said, "I used to listen to it in Vermont when they would up the frequency. You used to be on right after Alan Combs." She said, "Yes, you remember that show." Yeah, and we hit it off. And so we decided to try it, see if it worked. And I think that was in the spring of 2003. And our first broadcast was live from eBay Live in Orlando. And we did it for 15 years after that. Lee was invaluable. I learned everything I know about, well, radio and engineering and everything from her, but I don't know if I'm doing her a service or not saying that. So she knows more than I do. Anyway, I was a difficult student. She would say things like, whatever you do, don't eat on the air. And of course I'd eat on the air, and she'd go, oh, please, you're doing it again. We had a great dynamic because she was the great radio straight woman, and I was the fool. That's what I do. So it was a great dynamic. It worked for a long time.
It worked for a very long time. And when I really started paying attention, unfortunately, was the last couple of years of eBay radio.
Those years I was bored with it, and it showed.
No, that's when I went full, started going full-time eBay and heard about all of these events, and it just blew my mind. So for those that don't know, eBay radio has a huge following.
Yeah, did have a big
Griff has a handful, I want to say a handful, it's more than a handful of fans, the Griffettes.
Oh, no, those are
I remember hearing about that. So it's legendary. It really is.
It was
and
a
that,
yeah. It was
so, and that's when I learned about eBay radio and what a great deal it was and everything that I had been missing out on before I was a full-time seller.
Yeah. It was great. When eBay opened, eBay Live stopped happening in 2008 for a number of reasons. And for another show, I'll spill those beans, what happened to it, if you're interested. Lee said to eBetsy, who was at that time working for her in their voice marketing group, she said, well, we should just have our own events. So while eBay Open had disappeared, Lee and Betsy started these yearly eBay radio party in Las Vegas, which grew. I mean, it wasn't as big as eBay Live, but who cares? It was still a lot of fun. Lots of people flew in to come to it. And they did it from, 2009, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, I think for 7 years. I could be wrong. Maybe it was 8 years. Great fun. It was a lot of fun. Those were some of the most memorable events.
And that led to eBay Open.
Well, yeah, I think the idea was that eBay wanted to revisit eBay Live. eBay Live was a different type of event. That was like a huge conference. There were 10 to 20,000 people that would attend those. eBay Open was always restricted to about 2, maybe 3,000 people. Still fun though.
Definitely.
And with, who knows? I don't want to make any promises because I actually don't know what's going on with events this way. But I have a sneaking suspicion that once COVID is, in the past, that we'll be revisiting big events like that again.
And I can't wait for it. Thinking back, I thought I was in that transition is when I really started getting into eBay radio, transitioning to the eBay for Business podcast. So how did the podcast evolve from eBay radio?
Well, it's funny because there were some assumptions made outside of eBay that the reason why the radio show stopped is because eBay cut the budget, which made me laugh hysterically. And I'll tell you why. Because eBay actually said, oh, you should just continue what you're doing. And I said, with the same budget? And they said, yeah. And that's when I decided, well, how am I going to replace Lee? And I don't. And at the same time, maybe this is a good time to pivot to some other format that actually might draw customers in. The one thing I always disliked about live radio was the same things that I liked about it, which is that it's really immediate. You never know what's going to happen. There wasn't really a big delay button you could push if Griff said something totally inappropriate, which I think is why a lot of people listen, waiting for those moments, because I just tend to do that. I know it's very bad. With a podcast, we could focus in on content. And it took about a year for us to get the right feel. We tried many different things, as Doug remembers. And now I think we've hit where it works, which is it's still human. We have people on. I will never try to sound corporate, and I try to get our corporate guests to never sound corporate. And I think with some success now, we've had to stop the tape a lot of times when I say you're using jargon. Get rid of the jargon. You're talking to human beings, not fellow shareholders. And it works. It also made it possible for us to actually focus more on content rather than just pure entertainment, which I think, even though we had a lot of guests and a lot of topics on eBay Radio, there were 3 hours and then 2 hours on Thursday, and that's a lot of time to fill. So I would resort to shtick and schlock and being a ham, which I find tiring. I don't know. Maybe the audience never did, but I always knew in the back of my head, what am I doing right now that relates to helping eBay sellers besides making them laugh or making them eye roll? We should really be focusing on content, and with the podcast, we can. So that's what I like about it. And we've gone to that format. So I'm still doing it. I would hope we continue doing even after I leave eBay someday. So I'm looking for someone inside the company who I can pass this on to. But as Doug knows, people come and go at eBay, and it makes it really hard to build something like a podcast and then hand it to someone. So I'm looking at a way to make it portable to someone else easily who's interested, so that they could just come in, maybe spend a week getting updated on how everything works, and then hand the keys to them someday.
I don't think Uncle Griff will be replaceable.
Well, no, but somebody
You're
else.
not going anywhere.
Oh dear, this is just what I was.
Only lasts a few months.
Yeah,
Right?
every time I bring up retirement, everyone looks and says, "Oh yeah, you're not leaving." Oh dear. All right. Well, in a sense, what am I going to do if I retire?
Exactly.
I feel like I don't work now. I feel like I got a great life. So maybe
We're just sitting here talking to friends.
That's right.
Yeah, you and Doug and all of those listeners out there in the dark.
That's right.
All tens of them.
Tens.
So all those podcast episodes, all those guests, do you have a favorite episode and a favorite guest?
I don't have just one, but I do have some really favorite guests. And of course they're sellers. One of my favorite ones was one I just did recently with the guy named Trong Nguyen. He was one of our Up and Running grant winners. And I've never had a seller guest who I could just wind up and then let him go. And he talked for over an hour. And I knew at the time, I said, well, it's going to be an editing challenge, but I can't say I don't got content. He was just so enthusiastic about his product that he built. I don't know if you listened to the episode. He builds brewing products. He's doing well on eBay. His excitement was infectious. And it just made it a lot of fun, not only to record. I'm sure you guys are figuring this out, but when you have an interesting guest, it's fun to edit too. It's not like it doesn't become tedium at all. So I think Trong was a really good guest. And even more recently, Sharon Gustard, who had the another Up and Running grant winner, she was last week. And I may be thinking that they're the best guests because my short-term memory isn't allowing me right now to roll back farther than that. I'm sure we've had others. Doug's friends, Glenn Zubia and Orlando, the Hustle Bee and Hustle Hack, were lots of fun to have on the show. They were really, really naturals. A lot of our sellers are kind of naturals when it comes to being on a podcast, at least those eager to do it, at least I find. And they're very helpful to sellers who are listening. And there's nothing more reassuring. There's nothing more fulfilling when you're doing a podcast and you're the host and you're listening to a guest and you know what they're saying is helpful and that your listeners are going to find it interesting. When you hear that, I don't know how you guys feel, but I always feel like, yeah, this is the reason why we do this. Not just so I have a platform to, be a ham, but we actually have people that have expertise and have a story to tell. And the story is very interesting.
And I've listened to those and they were great. I will agree.
Yeah, they were lots of fun.
Yes.
Sandra was an interesting guest because I didn't really focus on it. I want people to know outside of the interview, they probably got a feel for this. She had to stop her business in the beginning of the year to go and tend to her mother who died while she was there and then had to deal with the funeral. So on top of everything that she was talking about for her business, she had that to contend with. And that's just, to me, I don't know how people do that. Where that strength, that reserve of strength comes up, it to me is always just a wonder. So yeah, she's an incredible woman. Like so many of our sellers that are just.
And that came through in the podcast too.
Yeah.
It really did. And then there's a eBay seller story on her also. So
Yeah.
there's 4 of them currently up that
Yeah.
are really good to watch.
And this is another example of teamwork, which I think the advantage of doing this with eBay really helps is that we have a seller marketing team that helps find these people. In this case, they were up and running grant winners. That's a whole program where, they have to select the winners and then they meet with them and they do these recordings. And it's great because it kind of primes them for being on the podcast. And they tend to be really good guests. And without the social team or the seller marketing team doing their work, I wouldn't even probably find these people. So that's a great example of the symbiotic relationship between teams or within teams at eBay that really, really makes a job like the managing and editing a podcast a lot easier.
And what you said, what you both said really resonates with me, because that's what I always say at some point when I was at eBay, a switch flipped. And it's when I started doing the events and meeting all these sellers and hearing their stories and about their lives and getting to really know them.
Yeah.
And then that's what Liz and I love about this podcast though too, is we are talking to the wider seller community, not just eBay, but so many different sellers across the board. And I love the stories and all the connection.
Yeah. And you would think they would all be the same mostly, but they're not. I always think back to their, there's 8 million different stories in the city that never sleeps. I don't know if you're old enough to remember that TV show.
I do.
It's true. There's as many stories as there are eBay sellers. And some of them are pretty interesting. And then some of them are just like, what? You did what? When you were doing what? How did you pull that off?
Like you mentioned Glenn Zubia. When he started on eBay, he would buy NFL statuettes and repaint them to be other players on his favorite teams and sell them.
That's funny. I didn't know that. That's very funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love hearing about other sellers. I love hearing their stories. And I think that's what really draws me into the podcast, other than I like getting my news and information too. But just that whole, I love connecting with the community as a whole, which is why I'm so happy to be doing this with you today. Uncle Griff from community. What I see is the original seller community. So along with that, most memorable podcast areas, what would be like your proudest eBay moment? There's got to be a lot.
There's, I can think of a handful that meant a lot to me. One of them was on my 10th year anniversary of working with eBay officially. I didn't know this, but they had planned this little surprise event and Meg was there and I was asked to come down to join a meeting. I thought I was joining a meeting with, another team. And there was one of the rooms in building 7 was filled with people sitting in chairs. And I knew something was up because I could see that Howie and our 2 friends, Michael and George, were there. Sorry. Howie and George now passed on, but and Meg gave me a commendation for being 10 years and everyone was, they were all there and she gave me, hold on a minute, I'll show you what it is.
Okay.
I got to reach over here to get it because it's in the window. Oh, sorry, my headphones are I got to reach really long. Oh, darn. Okay. So how many people have worked in a company where they give you one of these?
Wow.
Oh my God.
Of a fatter, younger Griff holding the eBay 55 the book I wrote. And it just overwhelmed me. I just thought that's a moment I'll never forget. The other moment I'll never forget was in 2005, the eBay Live in San Jose. We did it at the, in the headquarters city. And the HP Pavilion, what was it called then? It's now the SAP Center. It may have been HP Pavilion then, which is the big Sharks Arena downtown. We had rented for the keynote speech and it was literally filled. So you can imagine how many people were there. And I was the MC for that event. And I found that it was memorable because I've never performed in front of that many people before. And it's interesting when you're doing that, you learn your abilities and your limits and what you can and what you can't do. And you're trying to keep a group of 10,000 plus people entertained. There were about 15,000 people at that, I think. And you look over in the control booth while you're walking around with the mic and they're doing this. got extra time, stretch it out. And suddenly I go blank. That was a memorable moment.
Is there a single biggest misperception you've heard about eBay?
Yes, it's an ongoing urban myth. You know what it is. We haven't seen much of it lately, but we've seen it. I've seen it for 25 years. I've never understood why it gained any legs. And that's the old urban myth of eBay, rolling brownouts or rolling blackouts, where we take, huge swaths of inventory and we make it unsearchable. We remove it from search. And
what? That's a myth?
Yes, it's a myth. Thank you. Yeah, that one always used to infuriate me and confound me, and everyone else at eBay were looking and say, where does this come from? I mean, today we know that conspiracy theories are everywhere, but back then that one just always surprised me. There was a bunch of other little ones. Where are some of the other ones? I can't remember right now, but that's the one I think that stuck with me, because up until recently, that was still something you would hear a lot from people. It tended to be people who would say, well, I noticed a drop in sales, so you must have taken all my listings out of search. And I would say, well, no, we don't do that. It's actually not something that we would ever do. Why? How does that benefit eBay strategically to take your inventory off of search? And
the other one that I hear is, but you capped me.
Capped?
I can't make any more. Yeah. You capped me. I can only sell so much. And then eBay shuts me off.
Well, actually, that's possible. Unless you're
Are you limiting me?
No, it's not. Every seller has a limit. And I don't know if they used to be available in your my eBay. You could see it. I don't know if that's still the case, and maybe I'm wrong about it now, but every seller has a selling limit. If you've been on eBay for a long time, your selling limit is probably something so astronomical, you would never hit it. It's a way for us to monitor unusual selling activity that could indicate an account takeover. That's what that was for.
But that's the big thing is eBay won't let me grow. I'm only allowed to make $5,000 a month, and then they shut my store off. I know it's crazy.
I think it comes from a frustration of not understanding how markets work. I don't think it's necessarily an intentional decision to vilify eBay. I think it's the easiest target when you may not understand how your market works, the kind of inventory you're selling, how frequently you can expect sales. And I think maybe a lot of the reason why we don't hear so much about the urban, the rolling blackout myth is because now there's such extensive traffic reports that you can see that people are finding your listings by the impressions in traffic reports and the page views. And then if you're not converting, that sellers are finding your item. They're just not buying it for some reason. And there could be a number of reasons. And your job as a business owner selling on eBay is to find out what that might be, the reason. We do our best to try to explain the most common reasons when they come to listing practices, which are, less than favorable. But sometimes it's market-based. And so if you sell a line of, for lack of a better word, kind of knickknacks from thrift shops, that's not like a go-to market that's always chugging. That's a very specified niche market of buyers who are looking for particular things. And it's why if you do sell in that market, the only way that you can be guaranteed to make a good living is to have more than 100 items up. A lot of people who complain, my items aren't selling. I'll listen, they have 100 items. I said, well, how do you expect to make any volume when you only have 100 items? This kind of inventory, which is a varied kind of one-of-a-kind inventory, you could call it in some cases, you need thousands of items. Lynn Drawley, she's not been on your show, you got to get her. She's a big proponent of this. She's actually made a good business out of it. But she, like other sellers of her type of inventory, will tell you that when you're selling those kind of vast and varied collectibles, you have to have a lot of them. A lot of them, especially if they tend to be low ASP or low value items.
So, and the example you used to give was you used to sell a ton of Tommy Bahama shirts. The market changed and they don't sell as much anymore.
No, they don't. I have very specific opinions why. I don't know if I should say it.
We'll stop recording and then I'll ask.
Yeah, no, I can tell you. I think without denigrating any single demographic, I think the primary buyer for Tommy Bahama shirts has grown old and died off. I think that style has kind of not Hawaiian shirts in particular, but that style of casual shirt just isn't as popular as it used to be. It could come back. I mean, if you're sitting on some Tommy Bahama inventory and you got time and it's not selling, put it away. See what happens in another 5 years. I
think
that right now.
The market got flooded.
Yeah.
It just, they're mass produced now. They're not just at their stores or at high-end department stores. They're all over the place now.
Yeah.
I mean, I know I used to be in that market. Now I'm like, okay, what I used to get $100 for, now I'm getting $35 for.
Yeah, if you're lucky. Remember, the embroidered ones were very popular.
Yeah,
it's hard to give even those away.
It really is.
Stay on top
really
of trends. If you're selling any sort of pre-owned or general line of apparel, I always advise people to get on as many retail clothing seller websites or even their mail order catalogs. I get several still delivered to me. These are companies that do a hell of a lot of market research before they make an investment in a clothing line. So they know what's going to be hot for the next year. And in some cases, they actually help set those trends. They're doing all the work. You only have to sign up and subscribe for their catalog, and you get an idea what the trends are, and you can look for similar merchandise. Right now, I still get catalogs from Paul Fredericks, from Men's Warehouse, from these niche, expensive men's clothing markets like what's it called? Cobalt and something. I can't remember the other one. I just had a brain moment. Territory Ahead. Even the Tommy Bahama catalog, they're doing the research to find out what the trends are. They're doing the work for you. You don't. All you have to do is subscribe, and it doesn't cost a penny. And you can keep on top of your market on their dime. What could be better?
Which is exactly why I have 98,000 unread emails in my inbox.
Yeah,
so
that can happen.
Clear it out. So Griff, you've pretty much seen it all. You've seen the trends. You've seen the really just e-commerce explode on eBay. What do you see the future of online selling? What's that growth look like to you?
Well, I think it's here to stay. Definitely there's competition, which was something that we did not have in the beginning of eBay. And I think it habituated us into a kind of mindset, which actually worked against us. But now, the competition's great. It helps drive us. So buyers and sellers have choices. So that keeps us on our toes. I think the future is definitely with younger demographics. There was always a concern that younger folks wouldn't be as active buyer or seller because it's what their parents did and they would rebel against that. We're seeing that not to be the case. However, how they congregate and how they share information has definitely changed. So even if you're an old fart like myself, it's probably wise if you're in business to get a feel for all social media platforms, because that's what they're using. Even something like TikTok, which was initially based for it was primarily very young kids. So you understand what they're doing, and you get a picture of how you should be marketing, how you should be sourcing inventory to help supply that market. Remember, somebody like myself, I've had the benefit of living long enough to see the antiques business basically collapse as younger people disown it. They have no interest in most of the antiques that when I was younger, I made a living on buying and selling. And instead, they're more focused recently on mid-century modern, which I'm sure if you're around my age, you kind of kick yourself saying, all I needed to do was rent a big storehouse and just fill it with that stuff when people were giving it away, and I'd be a rich man. Yeah, okay, you missed that trend. What's the next one? You have to have some forward vision, especially if you plan on being in business longer than 10, 20 years, so that you can meet the demands before they come. And I think a lot of sellers are actually very good at that.
They are.
And they're admirable. I love them. I learn from them. Yeah.
We just talked about that on our last podcast about the social commerce and how eBay's bringing in TikTok with the younger sneaker sellers.
Yeah, with great success, by the way. That has turned out to be a really brilliant move on the verticals team part at eBay. That's just been really, really amazingly productive. So hopefully they'll be able to extend that across other categories in the coming years.
So what is the hottest eBay issue right now?
Issue.
It could be a
Well,
good or bad.
I can tell. Well, if it's eBay platform issue, the hottest issue for the last year obviously has been managed payments. I mean, that's a huge change for sellers. I think more as a perception of what it's going to entail than the actual execution. You know, we were joined at the hip to PayPal since 2002, and actually before 2002, when it became the payment choice of buyers and sellers before eBay even purchased them. That move to a different sort of payment processing, I think, scared a lot of sellers. How's this going to work? We're now coming towards the close of that. We actually will be complete with our relationship with PayPal by the end of the summer. And almost everyone except sellers in certain categories, which can't be supported by eBay payments. By the way, we called it managed payments for years, and now we want to brand it as eBay payments. And it makes me shake my head saying, why didn't you think of that 4 years ago? Sellers latch on to a brand and they don't let it go. Power Seller being a case in point. So anyway, I'm technically supposed to call it eBay payments or payments managed by eBay. You all know it is managed payments. But yeah, that's been the biggest driver for customer support contacts. And it's also been a lot of questions in social. I think second would probably be the rapid changes that are happening to categories and item specifics, which entail work on the part of sellers and not understanding maybe the why behind item specifics. I try my best to explain it in layman's terms to dispel that notion that, yeah, it's just eBay employees sitting around in teams thinking, I have nothing to do this week. Is there something we can do to annoy sellers? Let's build that. And that's not what it is. It's actually really,
we're just not busy enough. Give us more. No.
Right. I do acknowledge that, listen, having to make changes to your item specifics it is work. It is work, but it's work that pays off. I've made them to my listings and I try to pay attention to them. So yeah, you have to do it. But there's some misunderstandings about recommended and required, the difference.
Sure.
And a lot of sellers, and I think we made a wrong move here. I know that I just interviewed Harry and he mentioned that this is going to change. Although it was well-intentioned, I think the gamification of item specifics with that little blue circle was probably not a good idea, because a lot of sellers look at that and say, unless I complete that circle, my item's never going to appear in search. So they're filling in some cases, recommended item specifics that have nothing to do with their listing. And that's wrong. That's the wrong behavior. So they're revisiting that. I said, just get rid of the gamification, but I think they're going to keep some version of it. So right in the meantime, I'm saying, as I said quite bluntly to one seller today who was complaining about she has to fill that blue circle. I said, do you list on eBay to win the blue circle game, or do you list to sell? You have to ask yourself that question, and you have to believe me when I tell you, you don't need to fill the blue circle in. Please.
Well, I will tell you, as somebody in the community, I am thankful for you for publicly saying that, and Harry for publicly saying that, so that other sellers can help other sellers to spread that word.
Yeah, it's important.
It makes it a little easier for people in our community like me to say, but listen to eBay. Griff said it. Go listen to episode XYZ. You don't have to do it, because
I always wonder if that's of any value. Griff said it. Yeah, well, that's why I'm not going to believe it. So he'll say anything. But that is definitely true. You don't have to fill that blue circle, that confounding blue circle. Just fill in the ones that are applicable in the recommended section. If they're not applicable, leave them blank. You'll be fine.
So you've referenced a couple big changes that have come over the past couple of years, and we know sellers don't like change that much.
Pretty much. That's a human. I wouldn't say sellers. I think that's a human attribute. Yeah.
Humans don't like change that much. Yeah. And some humans do sell on eBay.
Yeah.
What's, in your opinion, the best eBay change you've seen over the past few years?
Oh, there's quite a few. That's hard to actually quantify or list out in priority. For many reasons that may becoming apparent now, I think the PayPal separation and eBay managing payments, if for one big reason, And it may have just been my pet peeve for years, but the idea that we weren't able to net fees from the point of sale, which I always as a seller kind of drove me crazy. I hated eBay giving me the money and then at the end of the month saying, now give us some back. You got to give us some of that money back. And the natural reaction is, well, why didn't you take it up front? Then I wouldn't have to look at this invoice. And some sellers would look at that invoice and they would forget naturally as human beings, we gave you that money. We paid you. What they saw is a bill. And it was that just generated a lot of negative sentiment. So, and we knew that the only way we would get to fee netting is if we managed the payments. We couldn't do it with the PayPal setup. So I think that in many ways will prove over time to be probably one of the best things that's happened at eBay.
Okay.
I think there's a lot of other ones. Yeah, there's a lot of them.
It's constantly evolving.
Some of them are people involved. I'm generally pretty I'm pretty positive about our new employees and new execs, but convincing Jordan Sweetman to come back was like one of the smartest moves eBay could have made. No one understands selling like he does. And I think you're seeing the results of that now. Bringing back somebody who understands the old eBay, he was part of its formation and knew its DNA inside out, like Jamie Iannone, to be our CEO. Another brilliant move, I think. So a lot of the best things about eBay, I think, are the people. And Doug, you may be able to back me up on this. I don't know, but one of the joys of working at eBay still to this day is the astounding amount of talent that walks into that building and when they take a job, and how it kind of manifests itself both in the working environment and the things that get done. We have, and I don't want to sound like I'm blowing smoke, but we do have some of the youngest, best talent you can imagine. And a lot of it is just astounding to see the ideas that come up and the execution. We have the best, I think we have some of the best women in Silicon Valley working at eBay. They oftentimes even outshine their male counterparts. And I think that's something to be proud of. So it's a really fun place to work. We haven't been able to see each other for a year in real life.
Yeah.
And some of us have become agoraphobic, so we may never leave the house again, but it's still a pleasure. I actually love Zoom. I know it's fun to beat up on it, but it's how I get to see everyone. And when I deem that I'm presentable, I'll actually turn my camera on and let them see me.
Yeah. No, and what you said is definitely true. eBay was an amazing place to work. I still love it. I'll never forget it. I got to do a bunch of cool stuff, work with a bunch of cool people. But eBay probably doesn't get the credit it deserves, not only being a groundbreaker, but even currently in tech with things like the tech blog or the tech that they do, the tech that they share and the API stuff that they put out there for free use.
Oh yeah, that's so true. We've stopped. We are off that radar. You know, we were the bright shiny penny 25 years ago. We're now the old, corroded coin that no one looks at when it comes to that part of the world, but we're still here and we're still chugging along, and there's no company that makes a bigger difference in other people's lives than eBay. I will fight anyone to the death who says otherwise.
I actually just saw a thing in LinkedIn where female eBay employees were doing the women in tech with the younger female generation, kind of teaching them and bringing them up in the tech world. So it's not just about eBay employees sitting there saying, how can I change an item specific? It is tech based, like you said.
And it's strategic. It's not just, a little programs that I think I can work on. Our seller marketing team is, it's a mixed group, obviously, but it's been driven primarily in many ways by women over the last several years with great effect. I mean, when I read about other places in the Valley that supposedly have these toxic workplaces, it just makes me more happy that I actually ended up at a company where it's just not the case. It really is filled with great human beings who look out for each other. And, the recent buzzwords about diversity and inclusion, they're important. But in my 25 years at eBay, they were always just the assumed part of the DNA, and that was put into practice from the very beginning. I think that's because of Pierre, actually. His belief system really permeated the early eBay and continues today. So it makes it a fun place to work. If you're
I
looking
love
for a
it.
job, the resume site is jobs@ebay.com. And no, I can't get you a job, so don't send me.
Get me in. Put a word in.
Yeah. I'm not so sure that works anymore. Well, we were going to hire him, and then Griff actually wrote a commendation, so now we're suspicious.
Do you know anybody that works at eBay? Griff. Oh.
I know. That's anyone else?
No. So, Griff, you've been working with sellers for over 20 years.
Mhm.
What is your best customer service advice that you could give sellers for their buyers?
They're buyers.
Mhm.
Well, it's going to sound cliche because it's really not something I invented or came up with, but I think it pays in every human interaction, especially where something is going wrong, is to put yourself in the other person's shoes. Empathy. You have to have that. And it's also the same way when you're a seller. And there's so many aspects of being a seller who sells online as opposed to face-to-face, which can lead you to believe that you get suspicious about your buyer's intentions. We see this with sellers all the time. Again, a natural reaction. It's kind of a risk protection, self-preservation. But you have to avoid that in business. You have to actively work against that. Can it happen? Can a buyer take advantage of you? Of course. It can happen in any business. But to build a whole customer support or service practice around the possibility that someone might rip you off results in a business, a customer service practice is not going to serve you well at all. It's not going to serve your customers. And it's important not to have that mindset. You need to get out of it. Now, for some people who try to sell, they try out selling on eBay, it may not work for them. They may not be able to overcome that fear of the risk that they feel they're taking on. And that's okay. That's fine. Not everyone is going to be a concert pianist. Not everyone is going to be a doctor, and not everyone is going to feel comfortable being an entrepreneur selling. That you tried it says more about you than anything. It shows that at least you were open to the experience. But that's possibly, I think, the worst thing a seller can do is allow themselves to get into that mindset. And you hear it today still. You'll be reading chats or you read social media posts where people talking, and they'll use phrases like scam buyers and buyers out to rip me off. And I think, boy, I don't think you should be in business if that's how you think. That's going to color how you're going to deal with customers who might have an actual concern. You're going to immediately go to that place where they're trying to take advantage of me, and that's just not going to work in business. Not going to work.
It's good.
I understand it. I actually excuse it and forgive it as a human foible that happens to all of us. But if you're going to be in business, if you're not naturally resistant to that sort of mindset, you have to learn how to train your brain to not think of buyers as your enemy. Otherwise, you'll fail.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed.
All right, Griff. So do you have a few minutes?
Yeah.
I don't need questions.
I don't eat
Or
dinner.
should
anymore,
I? What's that?
I don't eat dinner anymore, so it's fine.
All right. Or should I say, Griff, do you have a few minutes to stay around for our lightning round? You can make up.
Wait a minute. No one told. My agent said nothing about a lightning round. What's this all about?
So if you need to make up points, Griff, this is where you can do it. Fast questions, quick answers. A few questions to make up some of those points. Are you ready?
All right. Yeah. Oh, I love stick.
Here we go, Griff.
Okay, Griff, first up, what was the first item you sold online?
Oh, it was a computer chip. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, that I remember.
What was it? Speaking of remembering, what was your most memorable sale?
You caught me in the lightning round. Most memorable sale. Pass. I can't remember. Sorry. I tried.
What was the highest price item you have ever sold?
I sold an Oriental rug for several $1,000s, and that worked out.
Wow.
Yeah, that was a while ago, by the way. The market's changed since then.
Nice. Yeah. The crowd likes that one, Griff.
The crowd should like it. I made good profit. Thank you.
What do you know now that you wish you knew when you started selling online?
How to take my own advice. I was so good at giving it out, but I wasn't always good at at employing it. I was terrible. I mean, I can't use the word, it begins with an A, but I do have a tendency to be one of those A people. And I wish I had taken my own advice when I was younger.
Interesting. That's
pretty self-excoriating, isn't it? All right. Well, we won't go there. It's a dark place. Don't make me go there.
So this is interesting for me because this is a question I learned from you that I used to include. So do you have anything to add before we go?
Oh, do I have anything to add? Yeah. If you're going into business, regardless if it's on eBay, if it's at a store, if it's at any platform, be open to every possibility. Never say no right off to anything. Always consider it, and if necessary, do the next step, test it. Whether that's new inventory, new pricing, new format, new platform. I know people sell on many platforms. Always never say no, test it first. Don't assume that something isn't going to work for you. If your plan is to be successful and to grow a business to, even if it's just a certain level that can keep you comfortable and happy, the only way you'll get there is if you're open to the possibilities or the opportunities or even the challenges that are going to be presented to you. True entrepreneurs face these and rise above them and never say no. Never say no to anything, including a sale. The best time to make a sale is when someone is waving money in your face.
Well, thanks for joining us, Griff. And this always makes Griff uncomfortable. He's a true legend at eBay. And I remember before I knew him, people would say, "Oh, that's Griff. Do you know Griff?" And then they would always say, "He loves this one. Griff is richer than God because he's been here forever."
Yeah. And you know what I used to say to that, right? Because it was always two things. What were the two things that people said about me behind my back?
Well,
one is that I'm richer than God, and the other one was another one I can't remember. And I would say, yeah, one of those things is true. I can't wait. Doug, you were the one who told me this, and you must remember what they were.
It was another one. I remember richer than God, and then that you
maybe I've cool been here. What something I've got I make things happen or something at eBay. And yeah, one of those things is true. So,
oh no, actually no, you are right, because it was when I got on the team. It was like, oh, you know Griff, now you're connected. You can get anything you want. You're going to go places.
Is that what? Yeah, right.
Yeah, that was it. Griff's richer
okay,
than
none
God.
Of those things are true in that place.
And look at you now. You got a podcast with me. I'm sorry.
Well, I'm going to let you two fight that out. Well, you know what's been great about your podcast? It's very conversational, which is what podcasts should be. And after you've edited and tightened it up and gotten rid of all the crap that I've said, it should be a pretty good episode, I think.
Yeah. I think so too.
Oh, it's gonna. And so I started just to put on my reseller hat and forgot that I was like interviewing you. I'm like just taking your advice, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, yeah. Listen to you. I normally am in my reseller space, right? So I listen to you on these AirPods every week.
Yeah.
And so I started just to put on my reseller hat and forgot that I was like interviewing you. I'm like just taking your advice, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, yeah. What are they going to ask next? Oh shit, that's me. I'm supposed to ask next, right?
Well, I'm the interviewer. I got to ask the question.
Yeah, because I'm just so used to having you in my head. I'm like, this is real. Like, he's on my screen. I get to interview Griff.
Yeah, and she doesn't charge me rent for that headspace. That's
exactly.
Can I sublet my space in your head?
Well, every once in a while, a little bit gets retained. And I'll be responding to a question or thinking of something. I'm like, well, Griff said.
That is true about how our brains work, right? So we never retain everything, but we do retain the most interesting things. And they usually tend to be helpful or confounding later on when you're trying to remember them. Like, what were the two things Doug said? I remember one of them about being rich. I don't remember the other one.
So Griff, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
And then all the other stuff that I said.
Yes. Thanks, Griff.
Thank you, Doug. Thank you. Thank you.
Very
Continued
much.
success with your podcast.
Thank you.